on got a little hot under the collar.
At 88, Jack Nicholson's story will break your heart. One name burned itself into the history of cinema like a brand from a hotter world: Jack Nicholson. He didn't just act, he detonated. He could terrify in The Shining, break your heart in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and cast an elegant, unnerving shadow over Batman and As Good as It Gets. His eyes held madness and mercy in the same flicker. His voice carved lines into memory. For decades, he walked like a living storm, racking up awards, rewriting the standards of intensity, shaping generations who studied him like scripture. And yet now, in the quiet of his 88th year, the roar has faded. In its place, whispers, uncertainty, a gathering weather that isn't applause. What grief settles on a man who once felt untouchable? What weight presses on the heart of a legend when the lights finally dim? Behind those guarded doors, a new chapter is written, not in triumph, but in ache. If his brilliance ever reached you, hit like right now. A small gesture for a giant who reshaped what acting could be. What's crueler than growing up inside a family you don't truly know? Imagine believing your mother was your sister, your grandparents, your parents. Jack Nicholson was born in April 1937 in Neptune, New Jersey, under a veil of secrecy that would mark him forever. His mother, June, a 17-year-old dancer, was too young, too fragile for the storm of motherhood. His father's identity was never revealed. To protect the family from scandal, his grandparents raised him as their son, while June was presented as his sister. On the surface, warmth. Underneath, a silence that could splinter steel. When he was 4, June left to chase her own life, and the boy who thought she was his sister never understood the sudden absence. That absence hollowed him, quietly, relentlessly. For decades he worked, laughed, and became a star, standing on a foundation he didn't know was false. Then, in 1974, a Time magazine reporter uncovered what had been hidden. The sister was his mother. The parents were his grandparents. It wasn't just a revelation. It was a collapse, a blade across the soul. He later framed it with a kind of weary iron. Dramatic, yes, but he insisted he was already formed. Scar and strength in one sentence. He turned that brokenness into fire. And you can see it, the storm behind the eyes, the ache beneath the grin. Without that wound, perhaps the world never would have met the Jack who could alchemize pain into art that still vibrates through time. How does a kid, fractured by secrets, decide to walk straight into the lion's mouth of Hollywood? At 17, in 1954, Nicholson left New Jersey for California with nothing but grit and a fever dream. His first gig wasn't a set, it was an office. An errand boy at Hanna-Barbera, ferrying scripts, soaking up the rhythm of creation at a distance. He'd joke later that he was made for more than carrying coffee, but it was hunger, not punchlines, that got him through. By 21, in 1958, he landed his first starring role in Cry Baby Killer, a low-budget B-movie barely remembered by anyone but him. For Jack, it was proof that the wall between dream and reality could be kicked in. The years that followed were a grind. He turned to writing, helped script The Trip in 1967, and kept hustling with Roger Corman in shoestring productions. Those sets were crucibles. He learned to improvise, to pull intensity out of thin air, to fight with nothing but will. He kept showing up. And then, 1969. Easy Rider hit like a lightning strike. At 32, he flashed across the screen with such feral life that everything changed overnight. Suddenly, the runner became the race. That role wasn't a milestone, it was ignition. The questions that haunted him as a child, who am I? Where do I come from? Turned into a voltage you could feel in every line he delivered. Hollywood had to pay attention. The ascent accelerated. In 1970, at 33, he seared through 5 easy pieces and earned his first Best Actor nomination. In 1973, The Last Detail proved it wasn't a fluke, and then 1975 etched his name into cinema's granite. At 38, as Randall McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he didn't just win an Oscar, he became a mirror for rebellion. The world saw triumph. He knew it was pain refined into power. In 1980, under Stanley Kubrick's merciless eye, he descended into the shining "Here's Johnny," an improvised flash that welded itself to pop culture forever. By 1989, his Joker twisted charm into menace with operatic flair, and a $60 million payday shook the industry. At 52, he wasn't just famous, he was elemental. Still, he had one more summit. In 1997, at 60, he gave a delicate human performance in As Good as It Gets and took home a 3rd Oscar. 12 nominations, 3 wins. A record that belongs to a rare air only a handful will ever breathe. Yet beneath the laughter of acceptance speeches, friends noted the quiet. Success can be golden. It can also be cold. If his career was a ladder toward immortality, his private life was a staircase that kept giving way. He married Sandra Knight in 1962, the only marriage he'd ever enter. In 1963, their daughter Jennifer was born, and for an instant it looked like he'd outrun the shadows that trailed him from childhood. He later admitted he thought he'd broken the chain. But the same voltage that made him unstoppable on screen made him hard to hold at home. In 1968, the marriage dissolved, quietly, without spectacle. A young family ended before it could take root. He rarely spoke of it, but the regret crept through the cracks he usually sealed with charm. In 1970, while 5 easy pieces lifted him further into legend, life complicated itself. Susan Anspach entered his orbit, and a son, Caleb, followed. Nicholson didn't acknowledge him at first, whether out of fear, timing, or the centrifugal pull of a career on fire. The silence lasted. Susan carried the burden alone. Over time, recognition came, but that early gap never fully healed. It was a cruel echo of the confusion he'd known as a child. He admitted, in his guarded way, that there were things he wished he'd done differently. Then came a sorrow that almost no one saw. In the mid-1970s, he and Michelle Phillips endured a loss. Private, devastating, and largely unspoken. Fame can make everything loud. Grief made this quiet. For Nicholson, it deepened the paradox. A man who gave life to characters with staggering force, unable to protect a fragile hope inside his own home. And then, Angelica. From 1973 to 1990, Angelica Houston was not just a partner. She was his equal. Elegant, flinty, impossible to forget. She knew the legend and the man beneath it. Their love burned bright and bruised. He could be tender 1 minute, destructive the next. For nearly 17 years, she stayed through the storms, until a final fracture. In 1990, Nicholson fathered a child with Rebecca Broussard. The silence that followed was heavier than any fight. He later confessed he'd lost the best woman of his life. That wasn't a line. It was the wound speaking. With Rebecca came a second chance that almost held. In 1990, their daughter Lorraine was born. In 1992, their son Ray. He took pride in them, boasting that they were the best production of his life, and meant it. But history, like a tide, returned. By the mid-1990s, that relationship too was over. No scandal, just a soft ending and another quiet house. The late 1990s and 2000s were dotted with flashes. Kate Moss, Lara Flynn Boyle, Paz de la Huerta, stories that flared and faded quickly. Outsiders called it roguish. Up close, it looked like impermanence. Across a lifetime, he fathered 6 children with 5 women. It speaks to vitality, but also fragmentation. He admitted that choices have costs. He knew the tab he carried. The retreat came slowly. By the early 2000s, he was stepping back. In 2013, he seemed to vanish from the screen entirely. In 2017, word slipped out that he'd retired, quietly, without a final bow. No swan song, just an empty stage where his presence had crackled for 50 years. In 2023, long lens photos caught him on a balcony in Los Angeles. The grin that once upended rooms was gone. In its place, an older man in an orange shirt, shoulders sloped, gaze far away, searching, maybe, for a thread of himself. Rumors circled about memory, names slipping, stories blurring. For someone who held entire scripts in his head and played them like thunder, that is a particularly cruel theft. He spends most of his time in the Mulholland Drive home he's owned for decades. Neighbors see lights in the evening, a figure now and then, a rare appearance at a game with his son, Ray. Small, tender moments that cut through the quiet. Age takes from everyone. For him, the greatest wound might not be frailty but solitude. Fame can fill a theater. It cannot fill an empty room. And yet, the empire endures. His net worth, nearly $400 million, testifies to a career that towered. There's the legendary Mulholland Estate, properties in Malibu and Shasta County, even a Hawaiian retreat, a constellation of homes scattered like artifacts of a long campaign. Inside hangs an art collection valued at over $400 million, testifies to a career that towered. There's the legendary Mulholland Estate, properties in Malibu and Shasta County, even a Hawaiian retreat, a constellation of homes scattered like artifacts of a long campaign. Inside hangs an art collection valued at over $150 million. Picasso, Matisse, Rodin, beauty gathered by a man who could afford to live with genius. In the garage, a Mercedes-Benz 600, a Bentley Mulsanne, a Range Rover, emblems of taste and power. He also left quieter fingerprints, shaping lines and moments in films like The Departed. And behind the spotlight, he gave supporting AIDS research, diabetes initiatives, the LAPD, and the Casey Lee Ball Foundation for Children. He wasn't just a storm, he was a seeker of beauty and a patron of causes that outlast applause. So how do you measure a life like this? Not by pretending it's tidy. Jack Nicholson's story is triumph and tragedy braided together. He climbed to Hollywood's summit and stood there long enough to watch the landscape change around him. He shattered expectations and remade the language of performance. He also struggled at love, at permanence, at the simple, ordinary peace so many people take for granted. The lesson isn't that brilliance protects you. It doesn't. The lesson is that even the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows, and inside those shadows, there's a person. Storms don't last forever. They break, they pass, they become memory. But memory, ours, keeps what matters. If one of his performances ever caught your breath, McMurphy's Defiance, Jack Torrance's Unraveling, the Joker's Wicked Glint, drop a like to honor what he gave, and share your moment below, a scene, a line, a look that you've never shaken. In telling those stories, we build the next chapter together. He may have stepped away from the screen, but in the minds and hearts he set alight, Jack Nicholson remains eternal.